So anyways, I was saying, Forrest Fenn, in this particular instance, I'm still reading the obituary. He apparently was out having lunch with a lady, and this is what she said. What a complicated, brilliant, incredibly unique human. I will miss our many lunches of Frito pie and lemonade in Tesca. Forrest giving every member of the wait staff he could stop $100 bills. That's pretty freaking cool. Believe me, that's pretty freaking cool. Well, you know that. I mean, we all know that. All right, so I'm going to read some of Forrest Fenn's opinions about death and dying. It's apropos to the subject. Lost treasure books he read as a boy influenced Fenn, who has always loved mystery, intrigue, and adventure. But the real reason he buried this treasure is because he developed cancer. And after a long bout of chemo and radiation, the doctors told him the cancer could come back. Fenn, worried the cancer would recur, said to himself, if it comes back, quote, if it comes back, I'm going to grab a pocket full of sleeping pills, take a treasure chest filled with treasure, and a copy of my bio, and I'm going to walk out into the desert. Sometime they'll find my bones and the treasure, but my bio will be inside the box, so at least they'll know who I was. I always thought it was very odd the way Fenn tried so hard to have a legacy. I mean, anyone that's followed the search knows what I'm talking about. The entire poem, the books, the treasure was legacy. He talked about that. People finding this in the future, finding my bones, finding my biography. He left a biography out there. And yet he often, when confronted with that fact, especially by reporters, there are numerous occasions where he go, I'm not looking for a legacy. I always thought that was very odd that he would deny that when it was so obvious. But, you know, Fenn tended to kind of play with people, so who knows what he was talking about. This thing with him talking about taking a handful of pills, we all know that his father did the same thing. His father went out and took 50 sleeping pills, I believe it was 50, and died because he had cancer. And Fenn said on numerous occasions, I would go out and do what my father rather did. I would go out. I could easily see going out. I want to die outside. He said that numerous times. I think we'll read about it. And he said, if I had reason to, I'd go out and I think it'd be great to just go to sleep out under a tree and kill myself. I mean, it sounds macabre, it sounds odd, but you would read these things with Forrest Fenn and they all sound very plausible and even normal. We'll read about that. Someone says, 2 years before the question, 2 years before you were diagnosed with cancer, your father was diagnosed with advanced cancer? Fenn, yes, my father had terminal pancreatic cancer. Question, and he took a handful of pills after he was diagnosed? Fenn, my father was given 6 months to live, and 18 months later he took 50 sleeping pills. Question, when you talked about facing death, you expressed that you'd rather die alone but with dignity, and at first you thought you might take sleeping pills at the sight of your treasure? Fenn, yes. Since I was told I was going to die, I wanted to do it on my own terms as my father had done. Question. So it would be fair to say that you sort of see this as a dignified way to go out rather than sort of dying slowly. Fenn. I saw my alternative as being a hospital bed that would offer a temporary postponement with a hose in my nose, tubes down my throat, and needles in my arms, and with friends and relatives watching and crying. That was the last thing I wanted. Question. Initially, you weren't really sure how you'd want to die? Fenn says, I don't understand that question. If I had my way, I would die under a tree somewhere deep in a pine forest and let my body go back to the earth. Well, he didn't get to die under his tree outside, letting his body go back to earth. But he didn't have to lay in that hospital bed either because he had a non-resuscitate. So Fenn had decided that whenever the end came, and they were not able, and he was not naturally revived, meaning, people shaking him or whatever, that he was done. So he wasn't going to worry about laying in that hospital bed. So there you have it. I mean, I don't have to keep reading these things, these anecdotes by Fenn. He obviously was absolutely determined that he was either going to go out there and die in the woods somewhere, hopefully with his chest, or if not, just die anywhere but in a hospital bed with a bunch of hoses and tubes and needles stuck in him, and he managed to pull that off. And I guess that actually would account for the non-resuscitate order, because that was exactly what he said he wanted to avoid, being in a bed, being propped up and kept alive, even in a coma or whatever. That was the last thing he wanted, so he got his wish. In the end, Forrest Fenn got his wish. Oh, let's see, what else do we have here? It's just so shocking. And the thing that people have said to me in the first couple of days was just over and over and over was the timing is so odd. Folks, I know the timing is odd. It is odd. It's just like you can't, you just sit there and you go, really? I mean, we had just settled back and we're, dealing with the fact the finder is maybe never going to be known, or possibly, we don't know, and that Fenn's just going to have to sit back and deal with the finder, and who knows what's going on with that. And Fenn has these court cases he's dealing with. By the way, people have said, and I agree, I mean, this just makes the concept of this whole thing becoming unraveled, or information about what's happened even more implausible, I think, right? I mean, with Fenn dead now, it just seems like the finder's kind of on his own. I know that he's having to work with the Fenn estate. The Fenn estate is out there. The Fenn estate did reply to Barb Anderson, and the Fenn estate has said to her lawsuit, where she was kind of given an opening about getting to know who the finder was. The Fenn estate has come back and essentially said, look, this is ridiculous. She thinks the treasure was in New Mexico. We know who the finder was, and we know where the treasure was, and it was in Wyoming. So in a nutshell, what I could understand was, not being a lawyer, they questioned, the location of where the lawsuit was even taking place, but more to the point, they said, or maybe this has to do with the point, that, look, she's talking apples and oranges, because she thinks it was found in New Mexico and it wasn't. So therefore, for the court to say there might be any chance that we have to give up the finder's name who found it in New Mexico is irrelevant to us, because nobody found anything in New Mexico that we're aware of. We're only aware of someone who found something in Wyoming. So yeah, I mean, it seems pretty commonsensical, right? And so I think, and others think, that maybe the court cases are going to come to a halt, kind of almost through, I'd have to say, almost through kind of common sense thinking about this whole thing. I mean, the whole, what she was trying to do, the whole thing seemed very odd to me. You can go after someone who's anonymous thinking they hacked you, but you don't know who they are, so you're asking someone else to tell you who they are. It just, I don't know. And then let's face it, with Fenn dead now, that closes so many doors, that so many answers that Fenn alone had, except that if we have a finder, if there is in fact a finder, and Fenn was telling the truth. And for those of you offended by me questioning Fenn telling the truth, this entire thing has made one thing very clear to me about Forrest Fenn. He bent the truth, he twisted the truth, he played word games, he played mind games. He made a 10-year treasure hunt last 10 years because he would, I mean, people think he flat misled them, I personally don't. When I've read what they've said, I've given you my theory before. I think if you're going to tell Fenn what you're doing by emails and he says, hey, you keep it up, good luck, I think you're onto something, or whatever he said, you have to keep all of that in mind with the fact that he is never going to tell you anything. So anyone reasonable would not take that to mean he's telling you you're on the, that he's guiding you to the treasure. Although, as I mentioned in the last video, someone had the idea that maybe Fenn had guided someone to the treasure instead of having it retrieved, just to get it over with. I mean, you can read the last videos. There's a whole bunch of conspiracy theories about what happened. And I'll give you mine. I'll give you mine, folks. And some of you are going to go, oh, Eric, God, let it rest. Man, you can't be serious. It's just an idea. It all goes back to the fact that Fenn was dealing with so many things. Fenn may have had it retrieved. You can't tell me he absolutely didn't just on his word, because Fenn spent 10 years fooling people. He was a trickster. He was a maverick. It's not who you really are, it's who people think you are that's important. What does that tell you? That tells you that you're misleading people. You're not, they don't see the real you. It's a very natural thing to do, but let's not pretend Forrest Fenn was some transparent guy who never only told the truth. I mean, come on. So this is my wacky theory. I just came up with this yesterday. Okay, we know that Forrest Fenn had a heart. Okay, this is the story we've been given. And folks, quite frankly, I pretty much think he probably had a heart attack. I think the heart attack could have been stress-induced. I believe that. I know Fenn was very good at pretending, if you will, presenting an image of cool, calm. Things don't bother him too much. I was kind of unhappy it was found, but I'm kind of glad it's found. No worries. Lawsuits, I've got people to take care of that. You know what I'm talking about? I think he was under a lot of pressure. And I don't think the pressure was going anywhere. I've said that before. What other lawsuits coming down the bend? Actually, I think I was reading about one the other day, but I don't want to talk about it right now. I forget what it was about. There's another lawsuit that someone's drumming up. Crazy people could still try to break into his house. And then he's dealing with the finder. And who knows what this S corporation means for the finder and how much the finder likes what he found, if in fact there's a finder. I think it's very reasonable that he might have had it retrieved. And if he did have it retrieved, that in itself creates a lot of pressure because he's living a lie. Although I think it's a great way to end it. I'd want to end it if I was Forrest Fenn. I've said that before. But anyway, to my kind of implausible theory, which I'll talk about anyway. What if he took some pills? We're not hearing about it. There's not going to be an autopsy that I'm aware of. The family just calls in and says he might have had a heart attack and he fell. What if Fenn took some pills? What if Fenn did something else that caused him to appear to have a heart attack or pass out or fall down and hit his head, whatever? Is there any reason they would do an autopsy? I don't know the ins and outs of that, but who's to say this wasn't suicide? What do we know? He was found unconscious on the floor in his study. They took him, and the initial call was that he might have had a heart attack. Well, yeah, duh, he's laying on the floor. Maybe, that would be what most people would think. Why did Granddad fall down? Why did my husband fall down? And he's unconscious. Maybe he had a heart attack. We don't know. He might have taken some pills and committed suicide. He said before he was too old to go back to where the treasure had originally been put anyway, so I guess the whole concept of going out into the woods and all that was kind of now in his rearview mirror. Folks, who knows? After all, before you just say, oh, Eric, this man talked about committing suicide in numerous interviews with reporters. How many of you have been literally sitting with a reporter from a national publication and talked about committing suicide? He did it. His father, he gave those interviews, and his father did it. So don't just blow me off and say I'm completely crazy to come up with the idea that maybe Fenn took some sleeping pills and fell down and then was not resuscitated. But again, maybe I'm wrong. And I'm willing to say chances are I am wrong. But I always like to question. I think it's good to question things. Folks, that's all I've got. Oh, one last thing. I want to... one last thing. I want to... Oh, man. Why am I always doing this? Just a second. Tober slept through the whole thing. I kept the TV on out in the living room where he is. And then I closed the door. I know some of you like to see Tober, but I did this interview, this video yesterday, and then I didn't like it. Folks, he just trashed the whole video. I mean, he was in, out, up here, knocking the camera over. He farted. He was right down below me on the table, right under my chin, and I'm doing the video, and all of a sudden I'm like, whoa. And he just let a silent one out. It was a silent bomb. Got me. Okay. So yesterday he was in rare form, so I'm actually glad I'm not releasing that video, because I know some of you really love Tober and Bell, and you rate me and tell me how much you like them, but, for others others aren't quite that. They're kind of like, dude, I'm trying to understand what you're saying, and the cats are driving me nuts. I understand that. Okay, folks. Oh, God, this drives me nuts. Sorry about that, folks. Okay. Getting up and having the blood circulated gave me another idea that I was going to mention. I mentioned it yesterday in the videos I didn't release. Someone told me, and I kind of accepted the fact that people were out there, very torn up by Forrest Fenn dying, especially if they knew him on a personal level. But this person said, did anybody cry for the people that died on the chase? I mean, 4 the concrete people that we know said, I'm going out to look for it, and they died. 3 others that that had shown interest in the hunt, but they don't know for certain whether they were hunting at the moment they died. But let's just say 4 people that we know died looking for the treasure. I don't remember anybody crying for them. I don't remember anyone really caring that much, and I include myself. You know what I did? It was very selfish. I was always worried that Fenn was going to end the hunt every time someone died. But it is funny, this affinity people have for Forrest Fenn. Tony DeCoppel came out. Tony DeCoppel, who did the Newsweek article that kind of was the first big story about Forrest Fenn, the guy that came out, and some of you are upset with me for reading his tweets. And he talked about Fenn being a grave robber, and some people, not that many people were that upset with me for saying Fenn was a grave robber, but some people just said, well, that's what they do. All these people, the thing about Forrest Fenn was, and I know now I'm kind of ending this on a bad note for, a send-off, but it's part of this thing of, it's not who I am that matters, it's who people think I am. Forrest Fenn talked a lot about Indian culture and loving Indians and loving the Indian way of life, and I would have fought on the side of the Indians against Custer. I wouldn't have been on Custer's side. And that all sounds wonderful, but he's breaking Indian laws and spiritual restrictions by going in and grave robbing. He's defiling their culture, and there are a lot of Indians that don't like Forrest Fenn because of things he's done. I talked about him in the last videos. So Forrest Fenn's a multifaceted person. And He'll be missed. He'll be missed if, well, yeah, he'll be missed. I was going to say if not for the fact that he was such a confusing, enigmatic person to me. But with the treasure supposedly found and back in someone's hands, whether it's in the Fenn compound or at the home of the finder right now or wherever it is, we knew we weren't going to get much information, and now with Fenn dead, I would say the only thing that's going to get us information of this, the only thing that's going to get us any real information about this is if someone comes forward in the family or a friend, or if the finder comes forward. Otherwise, it's going to have to be an investigative reporter, someone doing an investigative movie, documentary, whatever. Someone that really goes after these clues and I mean the clues to unearthing what's really happened in the end. Could be very boring. Could be that a guy found it on about the 3rd of June and Fenn announced it and the guy didn't want to be disclosed and he's got the treasure. Could be that. But just even find the location and the identity would be great. Okay, so I'm about done. But Zoe Old, one of Fenn's daughters, posted this after her father's death. This is Matthew 6:19 through 21. Lay up. You can tell I'm really good at reading. This is Matthew 6:19 through 21. Lay not up for yourselves treasure upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. I think that's interesting considering I think she's the one that had to hold the guy at gunpoint when he broke into her father's house with an axe. She was the one, I think Zoe was the one that held him at gunpoint. Could be wrong. But anyway, and where thieves break through and steal. Those thieves are always looking for that treasure that you accumulate. Where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So, a nice ending, I suppose. But Forrest Fenn, some say this was a very spiritual thing for Forrest Fenn to do. It's part of the great conundrum, the great paradox that is Forrest Fenn. It may have been a spiritual thing that he did, but he was, after all, putting cold, hard money and gems and gold out there for us to look for. And people died doing it. And now he's died. So we'll just have to see what happens, folks. It's just never ending. I keep saying this is my last Forrest Fenn interview, but I had a number of people say, what are your thoughts about the death of Forrest Fenn? So now you know. Now, I don't think my theory about, I'm downplaying it, but I don't think it's inconceivable that Forrest Fenn maybe took some pills or something. And if they're not going to do an autopsy and disclose that, then we'll never know that either. We'll know exactly. If someone says, she always keeps saying the same thing, Forrest Fenn wins again. I guess that is a way of looking at it. He's always tricking us. You never know. Everybody have a good day, and we'll see what comes up next. Later. June 1st, so maybe he was looking ahead. What made him disclose to us that an S corporation Tuber's laying there with his eyes wide open. I think I was just bombed silently. Now he's suddenly rubbing his. You ever seen that thing cats do when you're mad at them, or I hardly ever get mad at them, but if you accuse them of something like, why are you, doing that, and they start licking their paw like, I'm sorry, I've got anything else to be worried about but you, big human person, accusing me of crimes. And they start licking their paw like, I'm just busy here, I don't even hear you. He just started doing that. He passed one just now right under my face. It wasn't that terrible, but it was. Yeah, he's still laying here with his eyes open. He knows he got me. Don't you, Tober? Quit acting so innocent. You passed one. Whew, wasn't that bad. But the timing, folks.